All right. Good morning, grade sevens. It's so lovely to see all your faces again. As you remember, I am Miss Raw, and I will be taking you for life orientation this term. Now, what I am quite excited to dive into and to really explain to you about the focus for life orientation. Although this is a specific subject, it's important to know that your life orientation skills, much like your life skills in grade 4 to 6, focused on understanding what your society and what your world and finally the community in which you live in exists outside of school, and understanding that there are a range of influences that you need to be aware of as you grow up. So I'll be taking you through our content for the term. Our content matter for life orientation will be substance abuse. We'll be focusing and using two main methods of content sharing, which is this PowerPoint presentation. And secondly, we'll be making reference to your Life Orientation Today textbook. And thirdly, we'd also be going according to the CAPS Life Orientation document from the government. But most importantly, boys and girls, I think it's incredibly important for us to look at this within the sphere that you understand. So, what is substance abuse? The one thing I know is true, that the longer you do drugs, the more you're going to lose. And I've chosen this quote for a particular reason. It will give us some clear understanding as we make our way through the term, what it means to abuse substances and how that has both a social, emotional, physical, and environmental effect on who you are as a person. So throughout the week, the content covered for substance abuse will go from week 1 to 4. Today's lesson for week 1 will be focused on what substances are, and we will be using definitions, understanding our definitions with both a group work task and an individual task. Second week of term is focused on the symptoms of substance abuse. The third week of term will be focused on the personal factors of substance abuse. And the fourth week of term will be focused on how we can help those who have substance abuse problems. Now, I know it may seem like this is quite a lot of information, but if you recall, we covered this in grade 5, and our conversations around substance abuse were related to number 1, why is learning about substance abuse important? And number 2, understanding how substances, I beg your pardon, can become incredibly addictive if they are not monitored. So just from that, how many of you can remember something from our substance abuse classes that we went through in grade 5? Right, thank you. Thank you everybody for sharing. I think it's very important, especially when we're working around topics that are quite relevant as we are discussing this terms, that being substance abuse, that we all allow one another to have their own perspective, but understanding that with that perspective, we need to create, and what I advocate for, is a positive space and positive environment of learning. So again, although the subject matter that we are dealing with, some of you, this may be new for you, others of you, you've been through this before in grade 5, it's important to understand that with life orientation, that life orientation doesn't just happen in the classrooms, boys and girls, it happens in our everyday living. So for example, a lot of you may have already come across substance abuse on social media, or in TV series, or movies, or within our society, our community. Again, understanding that the topic that we'll be discussing in life orientation isn't only limited to class, and most importantly, that we understand the impact it has for our health, the health lives, our social and environmental responsibility that comes up with this. So without further ado, I think we should begin. So as you can see on the board, we have words on the left-hand side. These words include drug, hallucinations, addicted, I beg your pardon, drug abuse, and paranoia. On the right-hand side, we have definitions that would need to be matched with the words. So in groups of 5, what I'm going to be doing with you is dividing you up into groups of 5, and each group will need to match the column on the right to the column on the left. So match the word with the definition. After 5 minutes, I will give everybody a chance to go through 2 of their selected words and definitions that they are very sure about and explain to the rest of the class. All right, so by doing this, boys and girls, it's very important to know that we'd be recalling from our previous knowledge, understanding and maybe talking amongst each other about, hi, maybe in this series, I saw this, maybe that could be the right definition. Again, it's important that we have these conversations about where we may have heard these words before. And if you'd like some more clarity, please raise your hands and I'll happily assist. So I'm going to separate you now and you can begin. At this point, I would separate the learners, 5 in a group. So there would be 5 groups, 5 groups altogether with 5 learners within them. After about 5 to 10 minutes, I'll make sure that each group has completed the word and the definition altogether, and we will continue. Right, thank you everybody for your feedback. It's really fantastic for me to see how many of you are able to listen constructively and positively all together. So, as you can see, or as you can already imagine, these keywords are going to be vital as we go through the term. So these keywords, again, and after we finished explaining them, we will write them down in our workbook just to make sure that they're always there for us to refer to in case we may misunderstand something. So what is a drug? A drug is any chemical substance that changes the way you feel. Drug abuse is using a chemical substance a great deal. Consequences of drug abuse by using drugs could be hallucinations, seeing or hearing things that are not there, paranoia, which is unreasonable fears, especially that something or someone will hurt you, and addicted, having an uncontrollable urge or desire for something. Now, if everybody will open up their Life Orientation Today textbooks and turn to page 71, you will see that these are some of the key words covered on these pages. Now, what is important for us to recognize is that we have a clear understanding from the textbooks, but also making our own notes means that we are able to understand this information just that bit more. Right, so I'm going to give you 10 minutes to make sure that you've got this down in your workbook. Please make sure that you have today's date, keywords for substance abuse at the heading, and all 5 of those words and definitions down. Right, boys and girls. So we're going to continue looking at each one of these keywords in a little bit more detail. So as you can see, what are substances, or rather, as we've discussed, substances are a drug, I beg your pardon, is any chemical substance that can change the way you feel. Now, some drugs give users a high. A high is also known as a feeling, a high means that there's a feeling of excitement or joy, whereas others could make you feel relaxed. Understanding that there is a chemical shift within your body that makes you feel this way. This is referred to as a high. The drug that could be used may be legal, such as alcohol or cigarettes, or illegal, like marijuana. Also within this, the drugs can be natural or man-made. So just throwing it out there, I'm sure we already know this already, but it's really good to recap. What is the difference between legal and illegal substances? Good, thank you. So legal means it has been legalized officially by the government and is not prohibited to be sold within certain stores, for example. Like, you know, there's a Pick and Pay liquors. They are allowed to sell alcohol and cigarettes. They have a legal license to do so. Whereas illegal means it is against the law. It is strictly prohibited for people to be using substances as such. With regards to natural and man-made, when we speak about natural chemicals, this obviously means that substances means grown from the earth. Man-made has been manufactured, for example, in labs. We will get onto this at a later stage. So substance or drug abuse means using an addictive substance a great deal. By using an addictive substance a great deal and becoming an addict or addicted, we understand that this has an incredibly negative effect on a person's physical, mental, and emotional well-being. The person becomes dependent on or addicted, there's our new word, to drugs, meaning that they have an uncontrollable urge to use drugs. So I want to extend a little bit further on what it means to have legal drugs and illegal drugs. So we've already mentioned cigarettes and alcohol. So for, I think, a large majority of you in the class, you have either seen somebody have an alcoholic beverage or a cigarette within your life. So important to note that both of these legal substances have do have ramifications if abused. So important to note that cigarettes can cause cancer and other deadly diseases. Alcohol is also one of the oldest drugs in the world and provides the nerves in the brain to make a person feel relaxed. So over time, your brain and liver become more damaged, and alcohol can also make some people become angry and violent. Now, what's interesting and could be a class discussion as you get into high school, and you definitely will have these conversations when you get into high school. So rather a point that I'm going to make you think about is how have these drugs been legalized? Does anybody want to take a guess? All right, thank you for your feedback. Really lovely input, everybody. So other legal drugs also include alcohol, we've already discussed, caffeine, tobacco, we've already discussed, which is cigarettes, medicine, ketamine, and prescription drugs. So understanding that within medicine, I'm sure that maybe your parents or your caregivers have gone through this with you before, that there is a certain alcohol percentage, for example, in something like cough syrup. Yeah, so understanding that these have all been legalized to make sure that they don't go over a specific governmental percentage of alcohol that would make them eligible to be used for substance abuse. Very great, everybody. So illegal drugs. Two of the drugs that we are going to focus on today are marijuana and inhalants. Now, again, for some of you, you may have heard of these before. Others of you, this may be unfamiliar. So marijuana is also known as dacha or weed. And after smoking it, users feel relaxed and dreamy, but people do not realize how dangerous it is because it slows reactions down. There's difficulty remembering things. Hallucinations are possible, and there are big feelings of paranoia. Marijuana can also cause cancer. So these are some of the emotional and physical side effects of using marijuana. Inhalants are another illegal drug, and both of these, it would be important to note that both of these are used by adolescents today within the society because they are easily available, which makes it incredibly concerning. And we will mention how to combat this within our course content later in the term. So inhalants are when the fumes or gases of glue or aerosols are inhaled. They produce a temporary high. Long-term use can lead to the permanent brain damage, poor memory, mood swings, seizures, poor blind sight, and blindness. So with those two quick examples, I'd like us now to all turn to page 71 of our textbook and discuss the following statements. I beg your pardon, it's page 76. And we'll discuss the following statements. I'll divide you into groups of 3 or 4, and we will discuss the following sentences and derive whether it is a myth being untrue, or a fact. Within our groups, it would be important for us to take notes who believed it was a myth and who believed it was a fact. And we will discuss this in a positive way, whether they would be right or whether they would be wrong. So our first sentence would be, alcohol is not a drug because it is legal. Number 2 would be, sniffing glue gives you an instant high. There isn't time for it to hurt you. Number 3, marijuana is a plant that grows in nature, so it can't hurt you. Number 4 is, if you smoke marijuana, it will be in your blood for 4 weeks afterwards. Number 5, if you try tick once, you'll be addicted. And number 6 is, smoking is good for you. Now, I do understand that for some of you, you may not be able, or you may not be able to recognize what is a myth and what is a fact. And that is completely okay, boys and girls. What we will do is go through this as a group all together. And I think an additional homework assignment could be provided. But let's go through this all together first, and then we'll move on. Right, thank you so much for your feedback, everybody. And it's been really lovely seeing how each one of you have spoken to one another about why you believe something is a myth and why you believe something is a fact. So that brings us to the end of today's lesson. I would like for anybody who is feeling a little bit uncertain with what we've gone through to please let me know, and I'll happily go through what we've covered so far. A reminder to please bring both your workbook and your textbook with you to the next lesson. But before we go, we have a homework task. So our task until our next LO lesson next week is to write down anytime you see or hear something related to substance abuse, be it on social media, TV, in the movies, in conversation. And what we're going to do with that is I want you to tally it up. So then I want you to bring it back to class next week, and we can start to analyze how many of these substance abuse or even abuse in its entirety we are completely unconscious of hearing in our everyday life, and what kind of comment that leaves us with. Right, thank you so much. You've been an absolutely fantastic class, and I'll see you next week.